The worst betrayal in my marriage didn't come from my husband. It came from his mother. 3 years ago, I married Mark, a sweet, hard-working guy from Charlotte who worked as a project manager at a local tech firm. I was an HR specialist at a mid-sized healthcare company, and honestly, we had a great life. We bought a cute, older fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood, adopted a golden retriever, and were trying to save up to start a family. We were happy. Or at least, I thought we were. The real issue in our marriage always had a name, and her name was Evelyn. Evelyn was the kind of woman who commanded a room, but not in a good way. She was elegant, always perfectly dressed, and possessed this passive-aggressive sharpness that could cut you open before you even realized you were bleeding. From the moment Mark introduced us at a steakhouse uptown, I knew I was playing a game I didn't know the rules to. She didn't smile with her eyes. She looked at my outfit, my hair, and my shoes, and within 5 seconds, she had already decided I wasn't good enough for her oldest son. Mark was the golden boy, but he had a younger brother named Todd who could do no wrong. Todd was married to Chloe, a girl from a very wealthy family in Atlanta. Evelyn absolutely worshipped Chloe. Whenever we had Sunday dinners at Evelyn's house, the entire evening was a masterclass in favoritism. Evelyn would gush over Chloe's new designer bags or the country club membership her parents had gifted them, while completely ignoring anything I said. If I mentioned a promotion I got at work, Evelyn would just blink, take a sip of her Pinot Grigio, and change the subject to Chloe's latest vacation. It hurt, I'm not gonna lie. But I loved Mark, so I swallowed my pride. I told myself that as long as Mark and I were on the same page, his mother's opinions didn't matter. But then, Mark's grandmother passed away. Nana was the only person in that family who had ever been genuinely kind to me. She was a sweet, Southern woman who used to bake pies with me and tell me I was a breath of fresh air. Her passing broke my heart. A week after the funeral, Evelyn called a family meeting at her house to discuss the estate. Mark and I drove over, expecting a somber, quiet evening of organizing old photos and keeping Evelyn company. When we walked into the living room, Chloe and Todd were already sitting on the plush leather couch. Evelyn was standing by the fireplace, holding a small velvet box. The room was heavy with tension. Evelyn didn't even greet us. She just looked straight at me, her face completely cold, and said that Nana's most prized possession, a stunning, antique diamond ring that had been passed down for 3 generations, was going to Chloe. Now, look. I didn't care about the monetary value of the ring. I really didn't. But Nana had told me, privately, just 2 months before she died, that she wanted me to have it because she knew I would cherish the family history. When I looked over at Mark, expecting him to speak up for me, he just stared at the floor. Then Evelyn smiled, a cruel, satisfied little smirk, and looked right into my eyes. I think it's best it goes to someone who actually fits into this family, she said. If you've ever dealt with a toxic mother-in-law who tries to subtly push you out, drop a comment below, because this part still messes with me to this day. I sat there, my chest tight, trying to breathe through the humiliation. But what happened after we left her house that night completely changed my marriage. I stared out the passenger side window of Mark's truck, watching the streetlights blur into long streaks of yellow against the dark Charlotte night. My hands were shaking. I expected Mark to reach over, grab my hand, and apologize for what his mother had just done. I expected him to say he was furious, or at least that he was sorry she had humiliated me like that. but the silence inside the truck was deafening. He just kept his eyes glued to the road, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Are you really not going to say anything?" I finally asked, my voice cracking slightly. Mark sighed, a heavy, exhausted sound that made my stomach drop. "Sarah, please. Let's not do this tonight. My grandmother just died. My mom is grieving, and she's stressed." "Grieving?" I turned in my seat to look at him, completely stunned. "Mark, she used your grandmother's death as an opportunity to twist the knife. Nana told me that ring was supposed to be mine. Your mother knows that. She said I don't fit into this family, right in front of your brother and Chloe. And you just sat there. What did you want me to do, start a screaming match with my mother over a piece of jewelry?" he snapped, his voice rising. "It's just a ring, Sarah. Chloe's family has status, and my mom wants to keep them happy. Just let it go." That hit me hard. It wasn't just about the ring, and deep down, Mark knew that. It was about validation. It was about the fact that after 4 years together, I was still treated like an outsider, an inconvenient guest who had somehow tricked her golden boy into marriage. Honestly, I should have seen it sooner. I should have realized that Mark's coping mechanism for his mother's toxicity was absolute, blind submission. When we got home, the argument didn't stop. It escalated until we were standing in our kitchen, the dog hiding under the table, shouting things we couldn't take back. Mark accused me of being materialistic and jealous of Chloe. I told him he was acting like a child who was terrified of his own mother. He ended up sleeping on the couch that night. The next morning, I woke up feeling emotionally hollow. I went to work at the healthcare firm, buried myself in HR spreadsheets, and tried to numb the ache in my chest. By lunchtime, I realized I had left an important folder for an afternoon presentation on our kitchen counter. I drove back to the house during my lunch break, still feeling the heavy, suffocating cloud of our fight from the night before. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed a sleek, silver SUV parked at the curb. Evelyn's car. My heart started racing. Why was she here? Mark was at work, and she never came to our house without an explicit invitation. In fact, she usually avoided our fixer-upper like the plague, often making passive-aggressive comments about the older plumbing or the outdated neighborhood. I walked up the porch steps, my footsteps completely silent. The front door was unlocked. I pushed it open just an inch, intending to call out her name, but the sound of her voice from inside the living room stopped me dead in my tracks. She wasn't alone. She was on the phone, and she was laughing. "Oh, it was beautiful, Chloe," Evelyn chuckled, her voice dripping with malice. "You should have seen her face. She actually thought that old woman left her something. I told Mark weeks ago that if he wants to keep his inheritance from his grandfather's trust, he needs to keep Sarah in her place. She's getting too comfortable." I stood frozen on the threshold, the cold air from the air conditioning hitting my face, as the floor dropped out from under my feet. But what I found out the next second was even worse. I already told him, Evelyn's voice continued, drifting from the living room into the hallway. "If she keeps pushing for that expensive fertility clinic, he needs to shut it down. We are not spending family money on her. If she can't give him a child naturally, well, maybe he married the wrong girl." I couldn't breathe. The room started spinning, and I had to grip the doorframe just to keep from collapsing onto the hardwood floor. I felt a hot, blinding wave of nausea wash over me. Mark and I had been trying to conceive for 2 years. 2 agonizing years of negative tests, heartbreak, and quiet tears in the bathroom. Just last month, we had finally seen a specialist who recommended we start IVF. It was expensive, and we were planning to take out a small loan to cover it. I had no idea Mark had even mentioned it to his mother, let alone that she was using his inheritance to blackmail him into denying me a family. Evelyn laughed again, that light, airy sound she used when she was feeling particularly cruel. "All right, sweetie, I've got to go. I'm just dropping off some old linens Mark asked for. I want to leave before the maid gets home." "Oh, wait, I forgot, Sarah doesn't hire a maid, she just lets the dust pile up. Talk later." The phone clicked shut. I heard her heels clicking on the tile toward the kitchen. At that point, I knew exactly what was happening. My marriage wasn't just hitting a rough patch. It was being actively dismantled by a woman who viewed me as nothing more than an inconvenient parasite. And my husband, the man who had promised to protect me, was letting her do it. I quietly stepped back onto the porch, pulled the front door shut, and walked down the steps. I didn't want her to see me. Not yet. I didn't have the strength to face her without breaking down, and I refused to let Evelyn see me cry ever again. I sat in my car around the corner, staring blankly at the steering wheel until I saw her silver SUV roll past. I didn't go back to work. I called in sick, drove to a quiet park near our neighborhood, and just sat on a bench, letting the tears finally fall. If you've ever felt completely alone in your own marriage, drop a comment below, because that afternoon was the loneliest moment of my entire life. I felt entirely disposable. When Mark got home that evening, he acted like nothing had happened. He walked into the kitchen, kissed the top of my head, and asked what was for dinner. He looked so normal, so innocent, that for a split second, I wondered if I had imagined the whole thing. "Your mom came by today," I said, my voice completely flat as I chopped vegetables at the island. Mark stiffened. I caught the subtle shift in his posture immediately. He cleared his throat, avoiding my eyes as he reached into the fridge for a beer. "Oh, yeah? She mention anything?" "No," I replied, watching him closely. "I wasn't here. I just saw her car leave." "Did you ask her to drop something off?" "Just some old blankets," he muttered, opening the beer bottle with a quick snap. "Look, Sarah, about last night." "I'm sorry," I snapped. "I'm just stressed about work. And, honestly, about the fertility clinic. I've been thinking, maybe we should hold off on the IVF. It's just so much money, and maybe it's a sign we aren't ready." He said it so casually. Like it was his own organic thought. And that's when I realized she had been planning this for months, and Mark was already falling directly into her trap. Hearing those words come out of his mouth felt like a physical blow. He was using his mother's script, word for word. I stared at him, the knife still in my hand, looking at the man I had built a life with. He couldn't even look me in the eye. He just stared down at his beer, swiping a condensation droplet off the glass with his thumb. "A sign we aren't ready, Mark?" I asked, my voice terrifyingly calm. "Or a sign that your mother told you to shut it down?" Mark's head snapped up, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "What is your obsession with my mother? Why does everything have to be a conspiracy theory with you? I am making a financial decision for our family." Our family? I threw the knife down on the cutting board. It made a loud clatter that echoed through the quiet kitchen. We don't have a family, Mark. Because every time we try to build one, your mother steps in and pulls the strings. I know about the trust fund. I know she threatened to cut you off if you didn't keep me in my place. The color instantly drained from his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came out. I came home for lunch today, Mark, I whispered, the anger fading into pure, crushing exhaustion. I heard her. She was on the phone with Chloe, bragging about how she humiliated me with the ring, and how she told you to stop the IVF. And here you are, doing exactly what she ordered. You sold out our future children for a payout from Evelyn. Sarah, it's not like that, he stammered, taking a step toward me, reaching his hands out. You don't understand the pressure she puts on me. The trust fund, it's a massive amount of money. It would secure our retirement, it would pay for our kids' college. I'm doing this for us. No, I said, stepping back so he couldn't touch me. You're doing it for her. Because you are more afraid of her disapproval than you are of losing me. He tried to argue, he tried to gaslight me, claiming I misunderstood the conversation, but I was completely checked out. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just walked upstairs, packed a suitcase, and left. I went to stay at a hotel near my office. Tell me where you're watching from, because honestly, being alone in that sterile hotel room was the first time in years I felt like I could actually breathe. I didn't call him, and I didn't answer his text messages. I spent the next 3 days in a fog, going to work, coming back to the hotel, and staring at the ceiling. I knew my marriage was on life support, but a part of me, the weak, hopeful part, wished Mark would show up at my hotel door, look me in the eyes, and tell me he chose me. That he was going to tell his mother off. On the 4th day, I received an email. It wasn't from Mark. It was an invitation from Evelyn's personal assistant, inviting the entire family to an intimate dinner at an upscale country club in South Park the following evening to celebrate Todd and Chloe's pregnancy announcement. Attached to the email was a seating chart. My name wasn't on it. Instead, right next to Mark's name, was a seat reserved for a woman named Olivia, Mark's wealthy, high-society ex-girlfriend from college whom Evelyn had always adored. I wish I had stopped digging right there. I sat in my office cubicle, staring at that seating chart on my computer screen until my eyes burned. I was done. It was one thing for Evelyn to dislike me. It was another thing entirely for her to actively try and replace me while I was still legally married to her son. And the fact that Mark hadn't told me about this dinner, or the fact that his ex-girlfriend was invited as his plus one, felt like the ultimate nail in the coffin. I closed the email, stood up, and walked straight into my HR director's office. I requested a week of PTO, effective immediately. If my husband and his mother wanted to play games, they were about to find out that I wasn't an amateur. I was an HR specialist. My entire professional life was built around documenting bad behavior, understanding policies, and handling toxic people with absolute, chilling professionalism. Instead of hiding in my hotel room, I drove straight to our house while Mark was at work. I didn't go back to pack more clothes. I went back to look through our filing cabinet. Mark had always been careless with paperwork. He kept all of his personal financial documents in a file folder labeled Future in our home office. I sat on the floor, flipping through the bank statements, the mortgage documents, and finally, the legal paperwork for his grandfather's trust fund. I expected to find a clause about Evelyn having total control. But as I read through the dense legal jargon, my jaw slowly dropped. The trust fund hadn't been set up by Evelyn. It had been set up by Mark's grandfather, a kind man who had passed away when Mark was a teenager. According to the explicitly stated terms of the trust, the money was to be distributed to Mark automatically upon his 30th birthday, or upon the birth of his first child, whichever came first. Evelyn wasn't the gatekeeper of the money. She was just the temporary trustee until Mark turned 30. And Mark's 30th birthday? It was only 3 months away. She had been lying to him. She had been using a fake threat of financial ruin to control his entire life, to force him to submit to her will, and to make him alienate his own wife. She didn't have the power to cut him off at all. She was just a master manipulator running a massive bluff. I took out my phone and took high-resolution photos of every single page of the trust document. Then, I put everything back exactly how I found it. If you've ever uncovered a massive lie that completely flipped the script on your life, drop a comment below. I swear my template for dealing with this family changed in that exact second. I didn't call Mark to confront him. I didn't send an angry text to Evelyn. Instead, I went out and bought the most expensive, jaw-dropping emerald green dress I could find. If Evelyn wanted a high society dinner party at the country club, I was going to give her an evening she would never forget. The next night, I pulled up to the South Park Country Club. I adjusted my rearview mirror, applied a layer of red lipstick, and took a deep breath. What happened when I walked through those double doors completely changed the power dynamic of that family forever. The crystal chandeliers of the country club dining room were blinding, but not as blinding as the sheer panic in Mark's eyes when he saw me walk through the door. I didn't sneak in. I walked with my shoulders back, my emerald green dress cutting through the sea of beige and pastel linens like a knife. The dining room was filled with about 20 people, close family friends, Todd, a visibly glowing Chloe, and Evelyn, who was currently laughing at something a beautiful, blonde woman was saying. The blonde woman was Olivia. She was sitting in the chair right next to Mark, laughing a little too loudly at a joke he hadn't made. Mark was holding a scotch, looking utterly miserable. When the room went quiet, Evelyn turned around. Her smile instantly froze. The elegant, polished mask she wore to society events cracked for just a fraction of a second, revealing the pure venom underneath. "Sarah," Evelyn said, her voice dropping an octave as she stepped forward, trying to block my path. "This is a private family celebration. You weren't expected." "I know, Evelyn," I said, my voice loud enough to carry over the soft jazz music playing in the background. "But since I'm still Mark's wife, I figured I'd come celebrate Todd and Chloe's big news. It's a beautiful night for a family gathering, isn't it?" Mark stood up so fast his chair scraped loudly against the hardwood floor. "Sarah, please, let's go outside and talk." "Why outside, Mark?" I asked, looking directly at Olivia, who suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "Is it because you forgot to tell your girlfriend that you're still married? Or because you forgot to mention to your mother that I don't scare easily?" "Sarah, you are making a scene," Evelyn hissed, stepping closer, her eyes flashing with rage. "Leave right now, or I will have security escort you out. You don't belong here, and you certainly don't belong in this family. Mark has made his choice. He knows what's at stake." She thought she had the winning hand. She thought the threat of the trust fund was still hanging over our heads like a guillotine. I smiled at her. It was a calm, genuine smile that caught her completely off guard. "You mean the trust fund, Evelyn?" I asked, pulling my phone from my clutch. "The grandfather's trust? The one you told Mark he would lose if he didn't keep me in my place and cancel our fertility treatments?" The room went dead silent. Todd stopped talking. Chloe lowered her glass. Mark looked at me, his eyes wide with confusion. "I don't know what nonsense you're talking about," Evelyn stammered, her face turning an uncharacteristic, blotchy red. "Mark, handle your wife." "Actually, Mark, you should look at this," I said, tapping my screen and turning the phone toward him. I had pulled up the crystal-clear photo of his grandfather's legal trust agreement, specifically highlighting the clause regarding his 30th birthday. "Your mother has been lying to you for years. She has absolutely zero control over your inheritance. It transfers to you automatically in 3 months. She couldn't cut you off if she tried." Mark snatched the phone from my hand, his eyes scanning the legal text. I watched his face change from confusion, to shock, to a deep, sickening realization. He looked up at his mother, his voice a ragged whisper. "Mom, is this true?" But what happened next completely destroyed Evelyn's carefully built empire. Evelyn swallowed hard, her hand nervously flying to the pearl necklace at her throat. For the first time since I had known her, she had absolutely nothing to say. "Mark, sweetheart, it's a legal misunderstanding," she stammered, her voice lacking its usual sharp authority. "I was only trying to protect you. I was trying to protect our family assets from people who don't understand our lifestyle." "Protect me?" Mark's voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It shook with a mixture of profound hurt and brewing rage. "You told me you would dissolve the trust. You told me grandfather left a clause giving you total discretion. I canceled my wife's doctor appointments because of you. I let you drive Sarah out of our home because I thought we would be ruined." The entire country club dining room was staring. Olivia quietly stood up, grabbed her designer purse, and slipped away through the side doors, realizing she had been used as a pawn in a very ugly game. Todd and Chloe looked horrified, realizing the pristine family image Evelyn had built was shattering right in front of their friends. "You lied to me my whole life," Mark said, staring at his mother like she was a complete stranger. "You manipulated every major decision I ever made. You made me hurt the woman I love. Mark, don't you dare speak to me that way in public." Evelyn hissed, trying desperately to regain control of the room. "After everything I've done for you? Look at her. She's trying to destroy this family." "No, Evelyn," I said, stepping up right next to Mark. "You destroyed it the second you decided that love, marriage, and grandchildren were things you could control with a checkbook. I loved your son when we were eating takeout on the floor of a fixer-upper. I loved him when we had nothing. You're the only one here obsessed with money. If you've ever seen a narcissist completely lose their power in a single moment, drop a comment below, because the look on Evelyn's face at that moment is something I will never forget." Mark turned to me, his eyes shiny with tears. "Sarah. I am so sorry. I was blind. I was a coward." "You were," I said honestly, looking him dead in the eye. "And right now, you need to decide who you're walking out of this room with." Mark didn't hesitate. He looked back at his mother one last time, took his car keys off the table, and walked over to me. He took my hand in his grip tight and solid, and we walked out of that country club together, leaving Evelyn standing alone in the center of the room she no longer commanded. But our story didn't end in that parking lot. The real work was just beginning. We didn't speak a single word on the drive back to our house. The silence this time was different. It wasn't heavy with resentful anger, it was the quiet that follows a massive, earth-shattering storm. When we walked through our front door, the dog ran up to greet us, his tail wagging happily. It felt like walking back into a life we had almost let someone else destroy. Mark sat down at the kitchen island, buried his face in his hands, and wept. I'm not talking about a few quiet tears. He broke down completely, the weight of a lifetime of his mother's emotional abuse, gaslighting, and manipulation finally crashing down on him. He apologized over and over again, for the ring, for the fertility clinic, for not protecting me, and for letting his mother dictate the terms of our happiness. I sat next to him and listened. I didn't interrupt, and I didn't offer cheap forgiveness. I knew that love wasn't the issue here, the issue was boundaries. I love you, Mark, I told him, once he had quieted down. But love isn't enough anymore. If we are going to save this marriage, things have to change completely. I am not playing second priority to your mother ever again. Whatever it takes, he said, looking at me with absolute sincerity. I mean it, Sarah. Whatever it takes. The next morning, Mark took the first real step. He called Evelyn. He didn't yell, and he didn't argue. He calmly informed her that we were going completely no contact. He told her not to call, not to text, and not to show up at our house. He told her that until she could respect me as his wife and the matriarch of our household, she did not have a son. Then, he blocked her number on both of our phones. It wasn't an easy transition. Over the next few weeks, Evelyn tried every manipulation tactic in the book. She sent Todd to our house to play the peacemaker, claiming their mother was heartbroken and that her blood pressure was dangerously high from the stress. Mark didn't buy it. He told Todd that if he couldn't respect our boundaries, he would be cut off too. If you enjoy emotional real-life stories about people finally finding their strength, make sure to subscribe, because watching my husband finally grow a backbone was the most beautiful thing I've ever witnessed. We immediately restarted our consultations at the fertility clinic, using our own savings and a small personal loan, completely independent of any family money. We didn't need Evelyn's trust fund, and we certainly didn't need her permission to build our family. But our ultimate peace didn't come from cutting Evelyn out. It came from a surprise discovery we made just a few months later. 4 months after that night at the country club, I stood in our bathroom at 6 o'clock in the morning, staring down at a small plastic stick resting on the counter. 2 pink lines. I blinked, rubbing my eyes, thinking my mind was playing tricks on me after years of disappointment. But the lines didn't disappear. They grew darker. For the first time in 3 years, the test was positive. We hadn't even started the official IVF injections yet. The clinic had just adjusted my thyroid medication and helped us track my cycle more accurately. Free from the toxic, suffocating stress of Evelyn's constant shadow, my body had finally relaxed enough to do what we had prayed for. When I showed Mark, he collapsed onto his knees right there on the bathroom floor, wrapping his arms around my waist and pressing his face into my stomach, crying tears of pure, unadulterated joy. We welcomed our beautiful baby girl, Maya, into the world the following summer. Evelyn found out about the pregnancy through mutual family friends, and the manipulation attempts reached an all-time high. She sent extravagant baby gifts to our house, a designer stroller, heirloom blankets, and silver rattles. She even wrote a long, dramatic letter claiming that a grandmother has a legal right to her legacy. Mark handled it with total, chilling composure. He didn't open the boxes. He drove them straight to a local women's shelter and donated every single item. He sent the letter back to her unopened with a single note written on the envelope: "Our daughter will never be a pawn in your games. Do not contact us again." Today, our life is completely different. Maya is 2 years old, running around our fully renovated fixer-upper, her laughter filling the rooms that used to echo with arguments. Mark turned 30, and his grandfather's trust fund transferred to his account automatically, completely bypassing his mother. We used a portion of it to pay off our mortgage and set up a college fund for Maya, but honestly, the money didn't bring us happiness. The freedom did. If there is one thing this entire journey has taught me, it's that protecting your peace isn't selfish. It's necessary. Blood doesn't give anyone a license to abuse, manipulate, or disrespect you. True family isn't about genetics or status or who holds the purse strings. It's about the people who choose to stand by you, who respect your boundaries, and who love you unconditionally. I had to find my own worth and stand my ground before my husband could find his backbone, and it saved our lives. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you've made it this far, drop a comment below to let me know your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe. Remember, always know your worth, and never let anyone make you feel like an outsider in your own life. If you've ever dealt with a toxic mother-in-law like this in your own life, or if you've heard a similar true story, please drop a comment below and share your thoughts with us. If you enjoyed this emotional and inspiring journey, make sure to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life storytelling. Thank you for watching.